Greetings and salutations, my creative brothers and sisters. Welcome to Not Real Art, the podcast where we talk to the world's most creative people. I am your host, faithful, trusty, loyal, tireless, relentless host, Sourdough, coming at you from Crew West Studio in Los Angeles. Man, do we have an exciting bonus episode for you guys today. We're here with the one and only Badir McCleary from Remote. Hey, Badir.
What up, brother? I'm happy to be back. It's been a while since we've chatted, and I got a lot to talk to you about. Just from being, on the road and at these episodes, it's been a lot of cool stuff, man, and a lot of new developments that will only make the series better. I'm excited to talk about it.
Man, I'm so excited that you're here to talk about it. And you're right, man. It's been a minute, and I tell you, I don't know about you, but the last few weeks, man, it's just been rough. I ain't gonna lie, it's been rough.
Oh
But I
yeah.
tell you what, it's the dust is starting to settle a little bit. I think
Mm-hmm.
it'll be January before I'm in the clear personally. But and I know your life is crazy. So just the fact that we're able to find some time today to actually do what we love, which is A,
Yes,
spend time
sir.
together, and B, talk about our mutual love and passion for art and artists. So and with a
Yes,
focus
sir.
on public art with Remote, because I tell you what, man, I mean, you're this Remote series, and I know our listeners know about it, but for those new listeners that may not know, Remote is this exclusive series of what I like to call video stories, that you are this is your baby, this is your brainchild. You have been traveling not just the country but the world, exploring public art in various places, and what does it mean, and what's its impact, and what can we learn. And you do it with just such a human touch. You just do it with such a down-to-earth, relatable, accessible human touch that I think anybody, no matter if you're a newbie or whether you're an OG vet in the art world or what have you, you're going to get something out of this, because you just bring a very unique and singular perspective and voice to this topic. I mean, I don't know
Thank you,
about
brother.
you. For me, speaking for myself, and I'm going to steal a line from somebody that I know said this before, but it's like listening to you is like getting an MFA, man. I mean, it's like I'm learning something at a deep level.
And that's what I want. I think, that's what we both want, with us being just diehard lovers of art. If we can get any moment just to share that passion and someone just to relate in the same way, I mean, that's like gold for us, right? Like someone saying like, yo, dude, I enjoy what you're doing because that topic is right along, it aligns with my values, with my life, with how I see the world, this creative space that we're living in. And you get to see, especially through public art, that creativity that we only imagine sometimes left there for us to enjoy. And it's just awesome to just do the series like this with a brother that's so passionate, and a team that's so passionate to really just drive home and continue to just bring awareness to what's happening out in the world, because there is some stuff happening other than what's happening on the news. There's some things that are out here that can really bring a smile to your face, that can really make you contemplate humanity, look at life in a different way. Even, with one of the episodes, which we'll talk about with DC, even the way to look at politics, through public art. And I think that's very cool, because we're starting to align our public art, not starting to, because we've been doing it, but really starting to become aware of how the public art aligns with our everyday values.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and it's so easy these days to get sucked in and feel really pessimistic, and even
Mm-hmm.
nihilistic, about the state of the world. And so the question is, where does one find hope?
Mm-hmm.
Where does one
Mm-hmm.
find positivity? And it for each person it's personal, and each person it's a
Yes.
spiritual question, really. And spirituality is a personal thing, but I mean, I've always said art is soul food. Art,
Mm-hmm.
going to for me, and going to watch see art and go to a museum or go see art in public spaces, I mean, to me that's almost like going to church. It's a very spiritual thing for
Mm-hmm.
me. It's where I find hope and positivity. And so, that's why I think this work at Remote is so important, because man, oh man, do we need as much hope and positivity in the world as
Oh yeah.
ever. And so, here we are doing what we can do to let people know, thanks to you and your travels and your stories, that letting people know, hope is in your backyard.
Yes.
Hope is in your community, you know, in the form of public art. Just go check it out, go think about it, go look at it, go put your hands on it, go, you know, and experience that energy, you know.
Yes. And it's so like apropos that you mentioned, artists like a church or a holy place for people, because like being down in Texas, one of the places I always go when I'm in Houston is down at the Rothko Chapel. If anybody's never been, please visit. Even if you don't go inside, outside is just, they have a reflection pool, they have beautiful just grounds and the sculpture piece outside that it's very serene, and the Rothko Chapel is just that. You walk in and there's a book for every religion, every denomination. It's a gathering place for everyone just to be, you know what I mean? And I think that's what public art is. It's a place to gather and just be, contemplate, you know, um, and it really does, feed the soul in a way, that I've never had anything do before. And, I'm not taking nothing away from anything, but it's just, I realize that when I'm standing in front of art, it it does something to me. Like I seen a Instagram post the other day of a mother taking her daughter to the museum for the first time. And it was awesome because every time the kid stood in front of a piece, she would say, "Whoa, whoa." And it was amazing because I was like, I feel you, princess. I feel you. You know what I mean? Like, because I do the same thing. And it just related me to, it's like, man, I wish everybody could have that feeling. And, public art is out there for us to get that feeling. Sometimes we're so trapped in our own minds that we're not, cognizant of it being all around us, because it truly is all around us. But sometimes it takes a little journey or a trek to get your mind right to be able to see it. You know what I mean? It takes that preparation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's all happening, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's starting to see, you know, I think you know, consciousness, in the public sphere around art design, creativity is at an all-time high, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over the last 30 years, you can think about various benchmarks. I mean, let's face it, just for one example, I think Apple, right? Steve
Mm-hmm.
Jobs, with the Macintosh and with the iPhone, with the iPod, the iPhone. These products were so beautiful, right? And they were so
Yes.
popular. And so people started to really embrace design and aesthetic, in a different way around. They started expecting more out of their products and what have you.
Yes.
And so now I feel like, in public art, to your point, public art's always been around, but I feel like there's not just more of it, but maybe there's more of, well, there is more of it, but I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's maybe more of it because there's more demand for it. And,
Man. Yep.
and politicians are more comfortable spending the public dollar or allocating the public dollar towards public art, which is a beautiful thing. And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, to your point, I mean, we are, enjoying a bit of a renaissance. And so you can listen to the news and you can get negative and feel there's a lot of shit out there. The world's on fire,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
literally and figuratively. But the point is that, but there's hope, and you can counterbalance that negativity and find hope in the fact that wow, wait a minute, communities all over this country are spending good money investing in artists and art to
Mm-hmm.
beautify and lift up, their communities. And that's incredibly positive and hopeful. And so,
Yeah.
people just need to go and embrace that, lean in.
I think, like, and this is why you're awesome at what you do, because that's a great lead in for where I wanted to go. Um, so San Antonio, one of the episodes that, when we did for the series, they're doing exactly that. So I lived in San Antonio for about 4 years. I have family there. I worked for the military. I also, I've done tech stuff for years. So I've worked in the military on the tech side there. And San Antonio is just a beautiful city, but it felt when I was there in 2008 to 2010 ish, that it was still young on the art side. You know, it had museums. You know, it had a few galleries that were doing well. There's some folks out there who really know art, especially southwestern art, which is beautiful, especially when you see it across the backdrop of Texas and it's in its environment. You're right. You know, it's beautiful. Um, but they it wasn't an abundance of public art, or I wasn't aware of the public art that was there.
Yeah.
But now there seems to be a real focus, and I gotta, give kudos to the city leaders, because they're putting some real funding behind making public art a part of San Antonio's uh, uh, brand or personality.
Mm.
On the Riverwalk now, they had the Riverwalk Gallery. They're building an art park, and the artists are really coming out in droves with new murals, with creative sculptures and public art programs that are bringing in artists who've never done public art before and teaching them the process of being able to create their first art piece, working with materials, working through blueprints and plans. And I was just like, wow, this is exactly the leadership, that a city that's dedicated to providing artistic opportunities with the money that they're granting these organizations. Like this is exactly what that looks like. And I was excited to do that episode because I was seeing so much, and it almost blew my mind because I was expecting, the stuff that I knew, even though I go back and visit and I see stuff there, I've been to the Alamo for the first time, during this episode, even though I worked right across the street from it. It's
Of course, it's
insane.
always like that. It's like, yeah, I lived in
Like,
LA 20 years. I've been to, there's so much I haven't seen.
yeah, like it's crazy because I was like, yo, like I realized I'd never been in there. And mind you, you could snap your fingers and be done with the tour. It's really that small, but it's that historical. And it made me just kind of take a look at how San Antonio sees its public art, because there's tons of history in Texas. And I started to see like the Arvida de los Arbeles, the one that reminded me of the Calder, and you know almost like a mobile with all of these different um, objects and symbols to history. And it just was amazing, and I started to really open up and start to see the city for what it is and what it's becoming. And stuff like that really just blows my mind because I get a chance to highlight civil institutions, which we haven't been doing a lot lately. But just the kudos and just to get that as part of an episode of seeing that growth was amazing to me, brother.
Yeah, man. And and you're discovering these stories in so many different places. And I mean, part of what, and that's something you said earlier reminded me of that. I mean, because at the end of the day, right, like, you're a storyteller,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
well, I mean, you're an educator, you're a teacher, you're an advisor, certainly, a cheerleader, definitely.
Definitely.
I wouldn't call you a critic. I call you a cheerleader. You know what I mean? The art world's
Yeah.
got enough critics. Artists need more cheerleaders. I think of myself as a
Definitely.
cheerleader. But the point is that there are so many stories that aren't being told,
Mhm.
you know, in the art space. The Blue
Mhm.
Chip First World of Art has done a very good job of building one kind of business model with one kind of media approach to media storytelling. Okay, fine,
Mhm.
whatever. But my God, that doesn't serve 99% of the artists and the art stories that are out there,
Oh yeah.
and outside of the walls of the fanciest, galleries and museums out there in the public square. And you're just out there, discovering these stories, sharing these stories, and obviously curating the stories in a way that makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, you'll go to a place, first episode was Palm Springs Desert X, out there
Oh yeah.
in the desert and the hot and the heat and the bugs and the vermin. I think you said vermin out there in the
It
wilderness.
was all types of stuff out there. I could imagine what happens at night.
Oh my God. Yeah. Don't go at night. That's when the aliens come. And
Oh
that's the thing.
man.
It's like, if you've ever been out there in the middle of the night, and we both have, you
Yeah.
of the desert, you look up and you think to yourself, man, no, yeah, no, this is the spaceship lands. You know what I mean?
It's, it randomly just lands here, and nobody will ever believe me. So it's just like, oh my god.
And then so you went from there, then you traveled to Philly,
Oh yeah,
your home turf, so to speak, and you unpack what's happening in Philly, and tell some very important stories, and introduce us to some very important leaders, in the art scene there in Philly. Then you were back in LA,
yeah,
right, for episode 3, right?
oh
Talking
yeah.
about what happens to public art when you bring it
I
inside.
mean, yeah,
Oh, what
yeah,
is that transformation? Is it a net positive, a net neutral, net negative? I mean, like, what does that do?
yeah.
Bringing
What does that even look like?
outside art inside, right? And then you were in San Antonio for episode 4, right?
Yeah,
And
San Antonio and Houston.
then
Remember,
Houston.
I had to merge them together.
That's right. And why not, right? You're right there, like literally,
Right
it's
there.
right there, and then most recently, the most recent episode 5, you were in DC.
Oh yeah,
In
yeah.
DC,
That
you
was
know, yeah,
Houston and DC was cool because like they were those were two parts of the series that were two new things were introduced. It was really like the first interview of like a organization with that's dedicated to doing public art, out in the street with Up Art Studio of my buddy Noah and Elliot down there. Like they're just champions of public art, especially in Texas and also DC, to where public art was the exhibition. And it also was a first time on the National Mall. When you think about that with all these monuments and things that are out there and all of this, public history, there was never a public art show. And it's like, whoa, like
right.
wow, why not? But the way it was handled, and I got a chance to meet Paul Farber, who was one of the curators of the Monument Lab exhibition. Really, really great guy. We had a good convo about the Derek Adams piece, which is the playground, which was amazing. I have a lot to say about that. But it allowed me to meet meet the creator on site, in a sense. Well, in this case the curator. But it was awesome, like, to really get like a firsthand background of conversation while he was leading the tour, and had one of the you probably see in part of the episode toward the end when I'm speaking, one of the tour members came over and was like, can you talk about that again? Like, that was cool. And I was like, oh yeah. And I came over and I spoke to the tour group, and that's the community that public art brings, and I thought that exhibition was the perfect sample for what a community public art exhibition really is, could be, and could be a baseline for future things,
Right.
especially in, national parks or local parks, to where it could be about history. It could be about seeing what the future could be of a space. Even architects could use it to say, hey, we're thinking about bringing this aesthetic, to this. And now with AI, you could easily 3D something in that area to get, community opinion. So I just thought of, that in such a different way of like public art is driving um political and communal thinking, in a way that it hasn't before. And I think those episodes really lean into that. And I was happy for that. That was awesome.
It is fascinating, even how people react to art in an outdoor space, in a so-called public space, versus in a museum or a gallery, right? Like,
Hmm.
what is it about the fresh air? Well, right, what is it about the blue sky and the sun above and the fresh air that
It's a
gives
freedom.
people the permission, or the not permission, but the agency, or the confidence
Yeah,
to actually,
confidence.
that's the word, right? So confidence to say something, to ask something, to talk about something, and express themselves around that art. As soon as though that same person goes into a museum or goes into a gallery, 9 times out of 10, they become much more introverted and much more buttoned up and quiet, because that's the
Oh
way.
yeah.
Don't ask any questions. You know,
It's like the library effect, right? You
a lot.
know, like
That's what
you
it is.
you could have the same amount of shelves worth of books in your house, but you can go in that same room and just yell all you want. But there's like these social rules that when you enter this space, this is the etiquette. Like it's almost like these aren't yours. So
Right.
act accordingly. With public art, people feel like it's theirs, like especially as a taxpayer in America, it's in a public space. You're like, yo, like, I've put at least some money into this.
Yeah,
you know
that's right.
you know what I mean? I can get a little bit closer.
Yes.
you, you
Yes.
know and I think that's what that's what's needed. People need to feel like they have agency in it, because then they'll protect it. They'll engage with it. They'll have something to say about it. They won't just never mind it. When
Right.
it's in a private space, people
Mhm.
will say, well, it's some rich guy putting up some stuff, or this and this and that. But if it's in the public space, people actually have an opinion,
Yeah.
and that's what's cool. Like, they aren't afraid to share their opinion either. I look back to the release of and I got to get to Boston to see this, but Hank Willis Thomas's piece, where the Martin Luther King, the embrace, but it was
Yes.
like half and half, like it was parts of the body that you know kind of was like unexplainable for people. It looked like
Yeah, it
something
was
else. It might have
controversial. Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, yeah.
you know but if that was inside of the museum, people would just dismiss it as art. People don't know what art is. But
Right.
once it came out public, it gave the people to have a chance to have a conversation with the artist, even if the artist wasn't there to talk to everybody. They were able to lay their opinions out of what they felt, some good, some bad. But I think, I like to think that's what the artist wants. They want the dialogue about what this piece is, and what does it mean to that area, what does it mean to that space, and what does it mean aesthetically, because the city of Boston's residents have to look at that. They have to look at that piece. So shouldn't they have a say
Right.
on the aesthetics, the meaning, where it's placed? So it public art, again, it allows the public to play a part in what's happening in the theater of the art that's there.
Yeah, and then when the stars and planets align just right, there's so much pride. Like communities take so much pride in that art. I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Chicago guy, born and raised outside the city, but lived downtown for a long time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the Picasso piece downtown, iconic,
Mm-hmm.
iconic. It is so relatable to Chicago. Chicago loves it. People see that piece, they think of Chicago, and then, of course, that predates the Bean, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the Bean was installed after I moved to LA, but I mean, now everyone thinks about they see the Bean, they know
Being. Yep.
Chicago, and then these cities are able to generate revenue around that
Oh
art,
yeah.
and
Oh
tourism
yeah.
dollars and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, because they know the emotional attachment, that people have. And kudos to them for understanding the marketing around this, because they knew that the Picasso for the city's residents was a generational thing. Like the new generation of art loving Chicagoans, they needed something for them that was contemporary, something that they could call their own. And I think the Bean, I've heard people say, all types of things, just like about it. What is it? Is it's supposed to be a sky cloud and whatever, but it's one of those things that it's attractive, and that's what cities, love. And they've Chicago's done a great job of not just leaving the Bean as a solo piece, right? They've the digital piece. I keep forgetting that artist's name, where the faces are
Yeah,
there and the water comes out. That
amazing. Yeah,
interactivity,
yeah,
that's amazing. And then you go down to the next part, and the other artists. I literally have photos and all that, but I cannot remember these artists' names for the life of me. I literally look at too much art, but they have like it's like a crowd of like sculptured soldiers,
yes,
and They're and it's literally like 4 straight blocks of just public art.
Yes.
Like that was the city understanding we can create a place for people that do not want to be inside, that want to, like we talked about, feel free, want to see the sky, want to be able to engage, don't want to be restricted by someone telling them, hey, you can't, or at least there's less of you can't there than it is in the museum. Um, and I love spaces like that. I'm eventually going to get to Chicago and do one. I've so much footage of just being there. I need to get there and talk with some good folks and do a Chicago episode for this. Don't worry, it's coming, folks.
To my
It's
hometown, Sweet Home
coming.
Chicago, baby. Make it happen. Make it
It's,
happen.
it's coming. I got too many buddies, and especially like the Lower Wacker area, with murals down there. That's becoming super dope. You
Well,
know.
my alma mater, Columbia College, is there, and a
Mhm.
lot of students are spearheading a lot of those murals down there over the last. Because
Yeah,
then
man.
when I was going to school there back in the early '90s, I mean, none of that. I mean, it was mostly billboards and ads. You know what I mean? It wasn't
Yep.
art.
Yep.
But Chicago, on a certain level, like maybe because of its legacy in architecture and design,
Hmm.
and in a advertising, it was a big advertising town. But just because of maybe of its history, for various reasons, it maybe is a bit more open minded to public art maybe than other cities. Because I mean, the
Hmm.
Midwest is conservatively is regarded to be pretty conservative, and it is. But Chicago itself is, in some ways, I think, pretty open minded when it comes to art
Oh
and
yeah.
culture. But you mentioned this topic about Chicago. We talk about the Picasso, we talk about the Bean, we talk about those very tall digital walls that spray with
Mhm.
the faces, spray water. The scale of those things are are
Yeah.
are 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 just unavoidable, right? Like you see this. So let's talk about scale for a second, because I mean,
Yeah.
even in one of the pieces, I think maybe it was the LA piece, when you we were talking about bringing public art inside, and what does
Mhm.
that do? How does scale, the perception of scale, change, and how important is scale with public art, Badir?
I think scale today um, depends on your marketing budget, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Because right now, I think the scale of things is going to be about what's going to draw the eyes. Let's talk about something that we both marveled at, in our conversations. The Sphere in Vegas. That's a public art marvel.
100%.
Right now. And the scale of that thing, it makes people that may not even want to see a show just go see what it is.
Right.
You
You
know
want
what
to
I
see it?
mean? Like,
It's 33 stories tall.
yeah, you know.
Somebody said it's God's golf ball. Like, don't piss God off. He
I
tee off. But yeah, it's
like
huge.
that.
3 stories. Yeah.
And right outside of Vegas, which will be on the Vegas episode, which I'm definitely including the Spear too. But the Seven Magic Mountains, right outside, where they're just these tall, large rocks, big rock formations, but they're huge, and the scale of them makes you want to go. It makes you want to just take an exit off of a random desert, and go see them.
Yeah.
Like it's the scale. I think is it adds to the intrigue level. Almost the question of why would someone put this here? And I think that's that's a question often not answered. Like I think a lot of people, and this is where public art administrators, artists, and even developers could do a better job at, is providing information,
Yeah.
whether that's through uh, VR possibilities. I mean, we're expanding the realm of understanding how technology is fusing with art in a major way. If there was more information, maybe video about the installation, the artist talking, I think public art in itself becomes a many points on a university tour of art. You know what I mean? um the scale has to come with information. You know, Smaller scale works, are usually, I would say, more personable. to the community. We usually see smaller scale works of like people or like mascots or symbols that represent the local area, local community. But sometimes larger works have a more defined meaning, and sometimes they're not expressed as much. So back to the original question, how much does scale matter? Again, it depends on the message that you're trying to get across.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go super large to get people interested. Again, we talked about the Alamo. The Alamo's, even though it wasn't, a public art piece, its history, it's bigger than its scale.
Yeah.
So the history behind it makes that building or that complex seem way larger than it really is.
Yeah. Right.
To when you get there, it's just like, oh, I expected, something, this. And it's the other way around for public art. You
Yeah.
get there, you see this big thing with minimal information. You say, well, why did they even do this?
That's a great point you're making. I mean, by the way, like it's so important. This is a super important point you're making because, it's easy now. All you need
Mm-hmm.
is a QR code,
Yeah, yeah,
just put a QR code on it and then, make sure that QR code links to a video that is that the person wants to watch, a 2-minute video that gives them the history and the context and why they should care,
yes,
you know?
yes. And I got to give a shout out to our brother Man One, who I talk with a lot, and we both do projects with a lot, and he understands that in his work. We did a piece together down in Placentia, where his goal was exactly that,
Yeah.
and he brought me in and said, "Hey, brother, we want to tell that story," and
Right.
he's great at doing that in his work, and a lot of artists do as well. And I think if these public art administrators would take the time to understand that, look to the from the artist perspective, especially when muralism is involved, because these artists are sometimes in that community for days, maybe even weeks, and
Yeah.
they're engaging with people, they're talking with them, they have to explain what they're doing,
Right.
to hundreds of people. And I think, the cities and all of that have a responsibility as well, just to lend that courtesy, because it is a, not an intrusion, it's an addition to space,
Yeah.
that people want to know what's coming. They do that for, introducing the new Walmart.
Yeah, for sure. For
We
sure.
know all about the new Walmart that's coming. We know all about these other businesses, but
Yeah, and
why is it not?
that's
Yeah,
that's the marketing budget, right? Because they
marketing.
got to allocate money
Yep.
to the storytelling part, the marketing part.
Exactly. That's exactly it, brother. They don't allocate any money to the storytelling. And if they did that, I think the acceptance of public art rises by like 25%. People feel connected at that point. If you got a leaflet in your door or an email that says, "Hey, new public art coming to you. This is what it's about. This is what it means." Come out and meet the installer. Come out and meet the artist. You know,
Right.
you
Right.
would get more buy-in. You would have more public art, you know, buy-in from the
Yeah.
community. It would
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
feel like, we're all a part of the process.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's key. So right. So let's do I want to do one thing
Yeah.
and then I'm going to ask a question. So
Cool.
because I want all the listeners to know that right now all these videos that we're talking about that we're about to talk about are available exclusively at notrealart.com. Go to
Oh
notrealart.com,
yeah.
look for, search for Badir, search for remote. It will pop up. You will see these videos. We're gonna be redesigning the website to really feature them even more prominently, so it's super easy to find. But go to notrealart.com, people, and watch these videos right now, because we're talking about Palm Springs. We're talking about Desert X out in Palm Springs. We're talking about Philly. We're talking about LA. We're talking about San Antonio and Houston. We're talking about Washington, D.C. We got more episodes coming.
Oh
So a little
yeah.
teaser, we'll talk about that in a second. But here I want to go back, brother, because you were in each of these markets, and you and I can philosophize all day long about all these nuances. So like let's stay focused. People are like, God, stay focused. Okay, I'll try to focus. I want to just go down the list a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of listeners haven't seen these videos, And I just want you in your own words to talk about why you
Mhm.
think they need to go and watch these specific videos, right? So,
Yeah.
so for example, let's start at the top. Desert X in Palm Springs, like is you, and of course that was months ago now when you were there,
Yeah.
and it's not that, so you might have to go back in the old noggin a little bit to kick loose some of those most poignant memories, or most poignant thoughts. But when you think back on Desert X this year, and you think back on what you saw there and what you're experiencing there as you were trying to tell that story, what comes to mind, and why should people go and watch that video?
Yeah, one thing about Desert X was it's one of those things about, kind of getting out of your comfort zone. We all had to do that, during the pandemic, where um we weren't in close proximity. People sometimes left the city. A lot of people went to Joshua Tree and places like that outside of Los Angeles. And I think public art around that time really got a good marketing boost, because you could be out in the open air. You could still enjoy art. You could still be around people, even if you were distanced. In Desert X, I found that I think it was the year before the pandemic. But there was still some pieces that were out in the desert. And then, with Noah Purifoy's place, which, we have an episode on that coming soon. Um, I got a chance to just leave the city and go see art somewhere else that was, you know, not confined, that it allowed me to think differently about it, um, and I wanted to share that because there's some amazing stuff that's happening right outside of these large art markets. We there's places outside of like every major city. The New York, you have like what the um no, I'm sorry, Minnesota has the Walker Art Center, out there like in the little wooded areas. They have the Jack Shaman School out, and I think that's upstate New York. Pennsylvania have a lot of places. Texas has a lot of outposts like Marfa, things like that. Um, there's a lot of creativity because there's a lot of opportunity for an artist to really expand their minds. So I wanted to start the series off with that. Um, just to establish that we're going to be traveling to see work. We're just not going to be stagnant in cities. We're going to be going different places. We're going to be opening our mind to what public art looks like, because there were pieces that were, condensed in the community. Like we had the one piece by the school. We had the one piece made out of industrial materials by Matt Johnson that was by the freeway storage containers. We
Mhm.
had pieces of meaning. So it was really a salad bowl of opportunities, of ideas, of ways to see art. And I thought that was a good way to start the series of preparing people for what they're about to see. The stories that are contained in these pieces, and the ability to not only think outside the box physically by going outside your normal proximity, but creatively. We talked about scale. That was introduction of scale,
Yeah.
um, introduction of thought materials, and also an exhibition, because that's an exhibition as well, not as tightly knit or reminiscent of a uh, traditional exhibition like the Monuments Lab one in DC, but this one you actually had to put effort, gas mileage in to be
Mhm.
a part of it. So I thought that defined remote immediately.
Well, what
Um,
I loved about that particular episode was that it sort of, um, you know, addressed that issue of, well, what is public art when there's no one,
there's
no
no
public,
people.
you know,
Yeah, no
it's just like
public around.
nowhere.
What does it mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
I
Because
love
I
that.
mean, you think about it, right? Like all of this great stuff we're saying in public art, and I know that there's some folks out there that watch, HD and Discovery Channel and all that, like I do, and
Yeah.
you see those TV shows of like the world, 100 years after people, and you see things like what the Statue of Liberty is now decrepit, it has all this stuff, and it's like, what do these art pieces mean? Will they still be able to tell the same story to a new species even. You know, if we're lucky to have some artworks or monuments last 1,000, 2,000 years, what do they mean to the new society? You know, the same way we're grasping, you know, Stonehenge or the pyramids,
Right.
or you know, things in Easter Island, you know, that we predict that, you know, or assume that these things are thousands of years old. You know, they meant something totally different, you know, to those generations of people. But what do they mean to us? For us, you know, it's tourism, you
Right.
know, understanding the history. Will that be the same thing? I mean, we might have, if 300 years go by, you know, we somebody might think of one of these public art pieces of Desert X as a temple to, you know, a higher power,
Yeah.
because the translation could be different, the materials, you know. I remember it's so funny, on the first the remake of Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg, when the spaceship crashed, and it was like, now this holy land Kalima, you know. And it was Kalima was just because I think it was like uh live animals or something, was just, you know, but they turned it into something that was completely different. Their interpretation of it, you know, was formed by their experience. You know, our interpretation of this public art is informed by our experience. So it's like, when we talk about, like, you know, what I can imagine what happens at night, you know, the aliens come and all this stuff, like, what does that piece mean to that at that time? You know, I know it's crazy to think about that, but you know.
It is so true, and it's so interesting because we don't know shit. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, we
exactly.
don't know shit. And you know, we're doing our best to try to figure out, okay, what did that mean, or what was the significance of that? But I mean, man, oh man, I tell you what, that's why we have to just always have a bit of skepticism and a bit of
Yes.
whatever, because the so-called experts are just doing their best, man. They don't know jack.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? They know more than
Yeah, they're just,
but they're just trying to figure it out, and God bless them. But I'm just saying, like, let's keep it real. Like, you know, there's
yeah,
just way more that we don't know than what we do know. And you know, it's funny.
yeah.
I'm remembering years ago, I had a conversation where we were. I don't even know what it was. We were talking about, you know, the Holy Grail, right? Like, where was the
Hmm.
Holy Grail, and why couldn't they find the Holy Grail? And I said they can't find the Holy Grail because they don't know who did the dishes that night.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you just go figure out who did the dishes and start there, because he or she was the last person to touch the Holy Grail, as far as I know. You know what I mean? So anyway, I mean, we.
Oh, yeah. But that's the thing too. Like, it could have been thousands of people in that village to do the dishes. It is like,
Absolutely,
and then it
absolutely.
comes back to the documentation. Who wrote down that, you know, Erasmus or whatever his name is was the last person to? This isn't like the Chili's. You're not clocking in and clocking out. You know what I mean? Like, so,
And by the
you
way,
know what I mean?
absolutely. And here's another one for you. Here's another one for you. And then we can move on, because this one's gonna. It's like, you know. Turns out a lot of people don't realize. Speaking of the Holy Grail, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, the legend of Jesus Christ has like really become bigger. Of course, as things do, right? The fish gets bigger
Hmm.
the more and more you tell the story of having caught that fish. But it turns out, what a lot of people don't realize, that Jesus was a performance artist, and the crucifixion was actually his masterpiece. So you know what? Like, you know, I'm just saying it's a possibility. Think about it.
Yeah,
Think
and
about
then, you know, if folks, I'll let the listeners in, like, you know, there was a lot of controversy around exactly that with an artist named Andres Serrano. You know, so when listeners, when you get a chance, look up Andres Serrano's work and what that means to that. It can be disturbing, but he's having a conversation.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
again, you know, what's art without a conversation?
That's it. That's what, and
You
that's
know?
the whole point of art, is to have a
Yep.
conversation. We're living in such sensitive times that conversations are harder to come by, and that's what I love about you
Yes.
and I. You and I are just. I mean, we're doing what we love to do. We're talking about art and artists and this great work you're doing, and we're having fun with it. And we're making jokes, but you know, revealing
Yeah.
things. And that's what it is, people. It's just a
Hmm.
conversation. You too can have this conversation with your friend, with your
Exactly.
so-called, you know, art historian or whatever, and friend, and at the museum. What you can have these conversations. These are fun. Can't you hear how
Yes.
much fun Badir and I are having right now?
Yes.
like I know I, like it should be pretty self-evident that we're having a ball
Hell
over
yeah.
here, and you too, can do this. And so anyway, brother, yeah, man. I mean, I just, in episode 2, you were in Philly,
Yeah,
right?
that was a
So,
special one for me.
yeah,
That was
talk about
special because the Tiberino family, they're very important to the city of Philadelphia and the artists in the city because um, Ellen Powell Tiberino, Big Joe Tiberino, they've done so much for artists, and just I mean, Philly is known for public art. Mural arts has done an amazing job of just giving artists opportunities to be creative, providing programs for them to learn. They were kind of like the blueprint for how to run an arts organization in a major city. And San Antonio, I think, is following in their footsteps because Jane Golden really does an amazing job there. And the the family, it was just like just a rich history, when we talk about the markers of the city, that those are living markers, that home, that space are, even they started, years ago, where two artists bought property to share so that other artists can create. I think that's the embodiment of art making, and to be friends with, their children. One of Gabe is one of my closest friends, and to hear of the family story, to see the murals that he's done all around the city. I mean, you can't go around Philly and not see a mural that Gabe's done, or worked on, and continuing that family legacy. That was just important to, be able to show, be able to um, tell the history of, and just pay homage, and say thank you in a way that also educates the public. There's a few people that hit me up that says, "Hey, are they open? Can you go visit?" And I'm able to, direct them there, and it's bringing awareness of, a great history of just art making in Philadelphia, and public art too, because they're part of the fabric. They're, one of the families that are part of the fabric of what Philadelphia art making is all about. And I think for remote, that was a key point too, is showing that, art practice, whether it's, public art, family, sharing, is part of what this is about too, because public art is all about sharing that idea.
Well, and by the way, the Philly episode um, really gets to what we were just saying about storytelling too, because Philly with the
Mhm.
markers, like they're ahead of the
Yes.
curve on that. I mean, they're really, and maybe, I mean, they've been doing it from day one, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
creating markers. And for people who haven't seen the video, what do we mean by markers? There are these signs, there are these beautiful cultural signs of cultural historical information that
Hmm.
explains why that corner is significant, why that
Yep.
building is significant, why that park is significant, why that location is important. You can read these beautiful informational signs, aka markers, that tell you that story and give you that context, and it just
Exactly.
provides so much more richness and so much more emotion, to it.
Yeah, and even for me growing up there, like it was an education about my neighborhood. I mean, I'm 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 more aware now of, what's around me. As a kid, you just, want to play, ride your bike and do a whole bunch of other stuff. But as an adult, I'm aware of the greatness that grew up on the blocks that I frequented, and seeing and that's through the markers, and you're like, wow, this person lived here, or, this happened here, or, you get to just, it's inspiring, it really is. And, I think that episode, I think that's a great one worder for that episode. It's just inspiring,
Yeah.
and just to see what's around, who's doing what,
Yep.
and how it's being shared with the public.
Well, so the third episode, as we've already kind of talked about a little bit, because you were in LA and you were exploring, really this idea of bringing public art, aka outside art, inside,
Hmm.
taking public art private into a gallery space. What does that do? But one of the hallmarks of that episode, of course, was your conversation with Charles Dixon. and
Yeah.
and being with him in his studio. So let's just cut to the chase on this one and tell us about your experience with Charles and that conversation, because that was the hallmark and the highlight of that episode, I think.
Charles is just amazing. I mean, when you have over 60 years of experience in art making and woodwork and metalwork, and you have a great amount of not murals, but sculpture pieces, large installations around the city, and you just see his love for it, even at the senior age that he is. I mean, he's out there working himself, and he's always looking for new materials. He's always like he's like the search and rescue person. He finds materials, he brings them in, he sees new life in things that we would discard. And I've seen him do work with 5-hour energy bottles. I've seen him turn a car into a bird. He's working on a mobile vehicle now that's an art piece. He's just a creative brother. Like being around him is inspiring. It's exciting. He has tons and tons of history because he's worked with some of my favorite artists. He's seen Los Angeles public arts programs change over 60 years. That having that history, having someone with that knowledge of having public art outside, but also taking those same public pieces and the way that he works and not adjusting it, but just bringing it inside, to a space. How does that work? How sometimes how do you ship something like that?
Right.
Secure? How do you insure something like that? How does the gallerist install that? Understanding those things for me as a curator, understanding those as a researcher, even looking at things like how would you conserve these works? How do you protect these things? I was working with him, to even document the materials, because if these things go into a museum collection, they need to know what it is, where it came from,
Right.
because things erode, things, they rust, and sometimes they might need to be replaced to keep the piece whole, because after a
Restoration.
while,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's an expiration date,
yeah.
after a while. So, Charles was just amazing to talk to. And in contrast with Thomas, who's also very dope, his work is more fine, formal. It seems ready made for the gallery space.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes, even though I was introduced to it outside, it it felt almost out of place
Mm,
outside. It
mm.
felt too too fine for outside,
Too slick, too
too
polished.
slick, yeah, like too polished, like like nature hasn't agreed to this.
Yeah,
Like when something just looks out of place,
right.
it was, I mean, and I don't mean out of place like it wasn't beautiful or I didn't enjoy it, because I totally did.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
just was like, oh, I now see the difference in the placement of these different works. And it kind of it was my idea to show the comparison and contrast in both of those practices.
yeah, man. No, that was such a special conversation and a special episode, for sure, for sure. And then from there you bounced from LA, you bounced to San Antonio and Houston. So we've kind of talked about that episode, but I mean, like
Yeah.
people need to go check it out, because it really is. I mean, listen, Texas, depending on where you live in, my dad was stationed at Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. So
Oh, I know
I got
Fort Hood.
I got a lot of memories growing up, positive, lovely memories growing up, going to Texas, seeing our family friends, swimming in the pool, big old Texas pool in the hot Texas sun, and that was the 70s and the 80s. And Texas, has this incredible rich history. And these days, in our political environment, maybe Texas gets a bad rap for various reasons. Okay, fine, but like with any state, Texas is so beautiful and has so much positivity and so much goodness there too, in addition
Oh
to
yeah.
whatever drama's going on. But the fact that San Antonio and Houston are embracing this, because I mean, I'm old enough, like I remember going to San Antonio and Houston over the years, and I think they've really big time up their game,
Oh
in
yeah.
terms of public art and in terms of what they're doing to embrace artists and local artists and artworks there to celebrate and lift up the community. I mean, I'm really proud of them. I'm proud, and I hope, of course, everybody points to Austin, for what it is, but
Mhm.
no, in terms of public art, Houston and San Antonio might be on the leading edge in Texas, right? I mean, you got Marfa, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's a different thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I got one of will be in the later episode, which I'm doing Dallas and Austin together. I filmed the Dallas part, but I wanted to do Austin because like Texas is huge,
Yeah,
like you
huge,
could
man.
you could literally get so like a whole season just Texas. There are places
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
yeah.
all throughout. But like
By the
you're
way, by
right.
the way, by the way, by the way,
Mhm.
by the way, I'm sorry, but we got to talk because if you're going to Dallas, I mean, well, yeah, I guess you've already been to
Yeah,
Dallas.
I went to Dallas, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna say we gotta somehow do a segment on the Cadillac Ranch, but that's a whole nother conversation. Anyway,
I I want to go. Oh man, I
yeah,
want to go. Oh yeah, we gotta do that.
we'll talk about.
That's yeah, we'll talk about that. But
I
that is
stopped
amazing.
your flow.
Yeah, like it was one thing I will say about public art on my road from Dallas down to Houston on I-45. There's so I'm driving like maybe like 2 in the morning. I'm leaving one of my artist homies homes and just driving down, going to my cousin's place because I was staying over his house overnight in Houston. Um, and we talk about aliens. So you're driving down I-45, dark night, you're just chilling, you're probably just riding, and out of nowhere, it's this large, probably about maybe I gotta say it's about 100, maybe 200 feet, large sculpture that comes out of the freeway is of Sam Houston. It's like, and I'm pretty sure people have seen it. It scared the living life out of me, bro. Like I didn't know what was happening. It's late night and it's just a man walking out of the woods. Like I lost it. Like I almost like I'm surprised I didn't swerve. I just all you hear is a oh like and
Yeah,
then I realized like oh my gosh. So it was like talk about scale, talk
yeah.
about catching it at the the opportune time. You know, if I didn't look that up online and know that that's was actually there, if I'd have just told somebody, they probably wouldn't believe me. They thought I would have, seen a large alien man and probably would have called me crazy, bro.
Oh yeah, man. That's it's thank goodness you did know that because I mean I'm sure many people have been scared to death. How many accidents has that piece of art actually caused?
It has to have caused at least 10
Yeah,
because like when you're looking at that you're especially at night and it's lit at night too. So it's like it's if you've driven on Texas highways at night, like I have, it's usually mostly dark, like just the car lights.
lights.
But
Yeah,
when
the
you
moonlight maybe. Yeah.
when you see just a ball of light and then you see a man walking out of the woods, it's something to just like you'll get a oh crap moment
You're gonna you're
immediately.
gonna you're gonna wake up real fast and
Oh, immediately.
yeah.
Immediately.
Well, that's awesome. Party people listening right now, go out there and check this episode 4 of Remote, and watch and see what we're talking about here. And then the most recent episode, last number 5, Washington D.C. Man, I mean, and we've also talked about that a little bit, but just for me, I'll just ask you this question. It's like, what is the significance
Mhm.
of public art in our nation's capital? Like, so public art in a city like San Antonio or in the desert like Palm Springs or whatever, like that's one thing, right? But then
Mhm.
when that place becomes our nation's capital and you see public art there,
Mhm.
what's the metaphysical transformation,
Yeah.
what significance does our nation's capital, or the significance, I can't even say what I'm trying to say, the significance of our nation's capital, how does that impact the public art and how does it change the conversation?
Yeah, for I have two perspectives on this. For the viewer, um it shows that, our government actually cares, to allow, it, because you can't just go installing stuff on, the national mall. There's standards, there's a quote unquote brand, a government brand of how they do things, the message that they want to put out. So for the public, I think it's looked at as a very good step, in the support of arts. I thought that as well, looking from the public side, to where it was like, wow, they're really embracing contemporary art, as a way to, um, add artists as part of the conversation, because we know the institutions have tons of the greatest artworks, that are made in this country, in on view, and a lot of them in storage. um but it just was great to allow some of that to come outside and, live with the public. Again, not a lot of people want to be cramped up inside of institutions all the time. They get to lay out on the lawn. They get to see it next to the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, all of the other monuments and memorials that are on the mall. For me, as an arts professional, I got a chance a few years ago, through Sotheby's and Claremont Graduate University, to be on the Arts for America, down at the Capitol Hill. So I got to actually sit in on like things like budgets, um, the NEA grants, understanding how uh, governments, or state governments and local governments, are funded. Where does the money come from? How much is allocated? Um, so it was really interesting from that perspective for me to see, like, man, they're really taking an initiative. They're trying to add arts as a big part of understanding, um or a big part of, like, being a citizen. Arts is, it's a like almost like it's a requirement, like, like being a citizen, you're going to see art, you're going to participate, it's part of our life, like. And then also, it was really cool because the curators, they knew what to do with it.
Mhm.
They knew what artists would tell the right stories through their work. um they were able to, have tours, again, back to the information part, to where they were providing information about what these works mean, and enticing people like me to, come out and talk about it, and also share ideas with the other folks who were, um, giving their perspectives on it. So I think it was great for, them to understand, and also for, folks like me to relate it, to what's happening in our world. And, I mentioned earlier the playground. I thought it was very apropos because, you know, people look at Capitol Hill as this sort of political playground, where there's all types of jousting and seesaws and all types of stuff, and all this quote unquote juvenile stuff that happens in a playground. Um, and all these hoops and things like that you have to jump. I just thought that was very brilliant.
That's
Like
fun.
Derek Adams, it was dope. Most people would look at it and see, like, oh, the playground, what does that
Right.
mean? But I was like, you think of the significance of where it's at,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like when you look at that type of stuff in situ, kind of like when we were in LA, right, and we were looking at Richard Serra's piece, the band inside of LACMA. It's like, what does this mean? Well, it could be a contemplation piece, walking around, you're thinking, the same place, same thing with that, me sitting on the bars, I'm moving around, I'm showing, like, I'm going from up down. It's a movable, it's flexible,
Yeah.
like, just like politics, there's no one way, and then you start to look at it and it's like, all right, one side is color, one side is colorless. How does that play into the argument? Is what would America be if it didn't have all these colorful things like art?
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
it be if we just looked at all these brutalist buildings, down in, DC on Capitol Hill, and if it didn't have a, you know new designed building around it, this would just look like a cookie cutter.
Yeah. Right.
So kind of like playing the role of, like, an advocate, in a sense of, like, what does this mean? How does it
Mhm.
change? How do these laws look in a contemporary art form?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, man. Yeah. You're such a great teacher, brother. You're
Thank
so
you, my
inspiring,
brother.
man.
Thank
I
you,
mean, you have
man.
such
I
a
love
gift,
it.
such a gift. And I just, I can't wait to see what's next. So, I mean, we want to tease, right? We want to get people excited about the future a little bit.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I know you're working on more episodes. So
Oh yeah.
to the extent that you want to share a little bit, tease us a little bit about what's coming over the
Yeah.
next few months. Where are we going with remote? Like where's some of the cities you might be going to? Chicago, it sounds like. What's coming up?
I'm going to try to hit Chicago for sure. I'm going to be going back and doing Austin for we talking about the Dallas and Austin episode. I got New York City that I'm trying to finish up with some really really good pieces there. Also some like haunts that are like located in different spaces, like Graffiti Pier, and different little small places that used to be one thing but are now been adopted by public artists. I'm hoping to get down to Miami for Basel for that one episode, because there's a stadium, Miami Marine Stadium, that is a hot spot for a lot of public art. Down in Miami, and every year in Wynwood and all that, there's always some new creativity. There's always some new stuff, and public art like reigns, especially during that time, because of the inability for artists to be able to show inside all the time. Not necessarily at the main fair, because there's regulations, rules, and a lot of money that goes into participating in the main fair. But even the smaller fairs, there's just not enough venue space to cover everybody, so folks take to the streets. And
Yep.
that's such a beautiful thing because you see some amazing works that get, put up. You see the creativity of I don't want to call them the average artist, but the regular artist that just loves doing art. you
Yep.
know
The
they just
independent
want to be
artist.
a part.
Yep. 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 Yeah, that's the
So
thing, right? It's like with Basel, to the extent that it created a fertile situation, a fertile ground. All these other flowers are popping up like all over.
mhm.
And then of course you can probably thank Mr. Goldman,
Oh yeah, the
right,
Goldman family for
for
sure.
bringing for helping to bring all that, because I mean he knew the power of art to transform that community. Wynwood, because you didn't you 30 years ago you did not go to Wynwood.
Yeah.
And now it's
Yeah,
the hottest real estate play in Miami. It's crazy.
man, it's crazy, to see that transformation, because like I've been covering Basel. If I get a chance to go this year, this would be my 10th year covering Art Basel, from the main fair all the way to Wynwood. And I've filmed ever since 2014, and the change of Wynwood, when we talk about just what's been taken down to what's been put up to what's how the real estate has changed and the vibe of what it's become. You could really see the commercial aspect
Hmm.
of public art, and I think that's something that I want to address in one of the future episodes as well. Is when these places of artistic freedom become places of commercial opportunity.
Yes, yes. And
you
by the
know
way, how do the aesthetics of the art help you identify what the motivation is and what the intent,
yeah.
right? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah,
you and
it's
I, you know what I'm saying.
very
I mean,
yeah.
it's like developers are not they're not trying to be political. You know,
Yeah, like,
and artists love being political, right?
yeah,
It's
it's
a
a
so
very interesting dynamic,
yes.
like it's
Can I have some
and even
abstract expressionism here, please?
yeah, yeah, and even like, when we talk about like art law and public art, what does it mean when someone takes a photo in
Right.
front of a public art piece and produce it into something else?
Yeah.
I remember, in one quick story, I think it was like 2014 or 15 down at Basel. There was an artist, his name was A-Hole Sniffs Glue, um, where BMW, I think, or Mercedes, I think it was, where they literally jacked some of his artwork and had it in one of their campaigns, and it set off a whole thing about artist rights.
Yep.
folks look up that story. It's a great story for, artists understanding, their rights in public art, and just all of these cases that are prerequisites for these conversations. But yeah, like that's the type of stuff when we talk about, growing the series and all that. I want to touch on to that type of stuff more, because there are stories inside of the remote story. There's more to actually talk to, even in the spaces we've already covered. There's so much more that are there, that is there. I mean, to
Well,
get to. So
put another way, or put simply, like season one of remote, we're just scratching the surface of public art.
yeah,
Season
yeah.
two, season three, season four. I mean, we're going deeper, 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 because there's so many layers, so much
Oh,
complexity, so
so much.
interesting, intended and unintended consequences, right?
Oh yeah. Like there's a lot, there's a hell of a lot. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm
Oh man,
excited,
me
man.
too, brother Badir. Thank you, brother, for coming on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for always
For,
having me, man.
oh
Like,
man, you're welcome anytime, anytime. And I just love spending time with you, brother. And I love when you come and spend time with us here on the podcast. And
yes,
so
sir.
people listening, people out there, go to notrealart.com. Watch these
Please.
incredible video series. Just search for it. You'll find it. Remote, Badir McCleary, the one and only Badir McCleary.
Thank you,
And
sir. Thank you, sir.
you're gonna learn. You're gonna feel like your consciousness is expanding. Because it is, and your brain is, you're gonna be getting smarter, because you're gonna be getting new knowledge.
Mhm.
And you're gonna want to travel to these places, because like that's the other thing too. Like this is a travel show. You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
travel.
We want you to get up off that seat and go. Like, watch these episodes on the road to the
That's it.
art piece. I
That's
think
it.
that's the great way to see these. If we all got cell phones and iPads, put a remote episode on while you're traveling to go see art. It gets you excited. It gets you in the mode to, you know, ask the questions that you want to know the answers to. Like this is what it's for, and if this conversation isn't a great lead up, watch those episodes. It'll get you prepared. So I'm excited. I'm always thankful of having our conversation and friendship, because we always go to. I mean, we could literally talk to you guys for 3 hours and more about all this stuff. But I'm just so thankful, that the Not Real Art audience is, embracing the series, and the Not Real Art team is really given the opportunity to really show what's out here, and allowing us to be great. So, brother, thank you. Thank Morgan. She's writing some amazing. Read Morgan's stuff too, y'all. Like, she's writing some cool stuff about these episodes, man. Like, it's really, really setting the textual tone for what you're about to see. And I wanted to just give her a shout out because she's killing it.
Oh man, thanks for that. Yeah, shout out to Morgan Lawrence. Morgan is our editor in chief over at the blog notrealart.com, and she's doing a great job providing a setup and some context and some love, editorial love for this incredible series, so that people really are able to embrace it and lean in and understand it and consume it in the right way,
Oh yeah.
in the best way. And so, yeah, shout out to Morgan for all that great work that she's doing. And it's a team, right? It's a team effort.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot with a little over here, but we get up every day, passionate, excited, to do what we do, because it's not a job, it's a calling. And our passion
Mhm.
is helping artists tell their stories and promote their work. And that's what everything we do is about. And I know that's
Yes,
why we
sir.
love working together, brother Badir, because you do. I mean, that's your passion too. Spreading the
Oh
love
yeah.
and raising a consciousness, around the fundamental importance of arts and
Hmm.
culture, in
Big
our
time.
world. So thank you for that. And so I guess so. People, go to notrealart.com right now. Check it out. Get off your butts. Go. What are you doing on the screen? Go. No. Pick up the screen. Go watch these videos. You're gonna love it.
Exactly.
And all right, well, with that, we'll sign off, and we'll let people go watch these videos.
Yes,
And
sir.
brother Badir, great seeing you, my friend.
Always good to see you, my brother.
Talk soon. Have a beautiful day.
You too. You too.